Welcome to the Trader a Traitors podcast. I'm Matthew, a writer and 100% Traitors superfan working in TV development. The Trader features deep dives into every episode of English-speaking versions of The Traitors, and this series is dedicated to the Traitors UK Series 3. Joining me today to discuss episode 9 is another fresh face to the podcast, someone I know very well and who I know will have fantastic insights into the show. Let's meet them. Elliana is a freelancer working across TV, film, podcasting, and digital. She enjoys writing about moving image history, talking about Frankenstein, and researching just about everything else. And she is also partial to a Shrek rave. She's also kind of, well, I'll explain in a minute. Like, we're colleagues, sort of, officially,
Yes,
kind of still a
yes.
little bit.
We've been on many a Zoom call together, and you've never got a background quite as lovely as this one before, as in usually it's a pile of like clothes in my bedroom in the background. But I've made a real effort today.
Yeah, usually it's I'm just sort of have a bed behind me blurred out with some cats on it. So this is a bit different. Just to explain that sort of vague explanation, Eliana and I have been working together for about a year and a half, and in the
Mhm.
space of about a week and a half, we are being ripped apart. We are both going
Oh,
off to new jobs, which we didn't really realize when we planned the podcast episode back in December. But here we are. We're reunited for the moment. Um, You've caught up on a lot of Traitors content recently, I think, and there's been a lot of chat online about how this season, a lot of people feel it's not really shaping up as well as the previous ones. How do you feel about the season so far? We're at episode 9.
obviously, the buzzword of the season is Linda, 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 and I do think it's a tragedy that we don't get to talk about Linda today. Um,
We can still talk about
I
her.
we can still talk about Linda. She's not off the table at all, but I was sad to not see her on episode 9. As expected. But um I can understand a little bit maybe where people are going with that maybe it's not living up to previous seasons, but I don't think I totally agree. I just think it's a different kind of gameplay that we're seeing. And obviously each season evolves because you have the cast watching the previous season, and then they're never going to try and do the same thing necessarily because they've seen certain tactics play out and suddenly they're suspicious of those things. What I am finding tricky with this season is I think to follow some of the lines of suspicion. I think because
Mm.
of that reason, people are just shooting all over the show, and it's sort of developing from it's not necessarily about looking for a traitor, but I think like who's the most faithful, and then they must be playing the best game of it all. It's sometimes quite confusing to follow theories that are being made in this season, but I think that's interesting in its own way.
Yeah, I also think, and I'll probably talk about this as we go into the episode, I think the editors are doing a sort of crafty job of tricking us a lot of the time and making us
Mm.
think that someone's under fire, but they're not really, or thinking that this series is going in a particular direction and it just isn't. So I do have predictions about maybe what we're being fooled about. I'm not sure we'll get
Mm.
there.
That's an
Um,
interesting point. I do feel like there was some moments where, like you say, the editing makes you think one thing, and I think, oh, they've just done that to make us think that. But then sometimes even that proves you're proven wrong in that sense. For example, with the classic Jake spotting Linda kind of turning her head, and I think everyone at the time was like, oh, did it really happen like that? No one could have been that obvious. It must be some really clever editing. But then apparently that is exactly what took place. So sometimes you're even second guessing yourself on is it clever editing or is that really what took place?
Yeah, definitely. And but I don't mind that. I'm sort of quite happy to be
Mm.
tricked. Like as a viewer, I don't actually want to be completely handheld through the season and know what's coming. So I don't mind having the rug pulled out from under me sometimes and
Yeah,
not
it's
not knowing
fun.
where it's going. So listeners and Eliana, it's time to prepare because we are about to begin our own game of betrayal and deception. This is the Trader Traitor.
Ooh. You'll probably put a better sound effect in than me going, ooh.
No, that was a great sound effect. I'll just use that. I might use that from now on,
Hey,
actually.
for every single episode.
Yes. The mission for Eliana and I from here on in is to try and tell a sneaky lie to each other. The lie has to be a fabrication or a made-up fact, big or small, about the traitors or ourselves or anything else at all. For example, I could lie and say that, Eliana, I've just accepted a new job with your company and I'll be joining you on Monday morning. However, sadly, that's not true. I couldn't lie and say I don't ever want to go to the Traitor's Castle, when obviously I would give anything to go to the Traitor's Castle. That would be a fake, pretend opinion. So we're looking for fake facts and false pieces of information, rather than just fake thoughts and feelings. At the end of the episode, we will then guess each other's lie, and listeners, you can join in too and see how good you are at traitor detecting. Eliana, are you ready to betray me?
I am. Mwahaha.
I sort of can't wait for you to betray me. That's weird. I should want to beat you, but I'm looking forward to it. So our game begins right now, and we can get into episode 9 of Traitors UK Series 3. So we start with our usual recap, and we're reminded that Charlotte was given this ultimatum because Mina tells her, "Join me as a traitor, or I will murder you." And she accepts, of course. And I just like to do Mina's accent. I think it's fun. And
I love your accents, Matthew. Please accent away.
I've got another one coming up for Joe a little bit later. Even though I can't quite pin it down. Alexander tried some backwards opera singing in the mission last time. Jake then won a shield. At the round table, though, it was Alex who was banished for saying something slightly dodgy and confusing earlier on. Freddie tells Charlotte he thinks Mina is a traitor, but Charlotte decided to keep that to herself, interestingly. And at the end of the episode, the traitors were considering either Lisa, Jake, or Joe for murder. And there's something quite interesting about that I'll come back to when we get to breakfast. So we start off, we're back in the turret, and we're just sort of being reminded, Mina and Charlotte.
Matthew, I just want
Oh,
to say you forgot the most important bit of the last episode.
oh God.
Claudia told us that Alexander is single.
She
That was
did.
the most important moment.
That little clip is making the rounds all over Instagram and stuff. Yeah, are you happy about that news?
I think I am. And he had a lot to give in this episode as well, as I'm sure we'll get
Yes.
to.
I have warmed so much to Alexander. He's very handsome. He's quite quirky and like I thought he was just sort of very I don't know, very straight up and or straight-laced and quite serious, but actually he's a little bit silly sometimes and he's not really taking the game completely seriously all the time, which I quite like.
He's adding a bit of light-hearted relief that I think we are needing, which is nice.
Yes, yeah, I'm enjoying Alexander. So at the turret, we've got Mead and Charlotte saying, they've made their decision, they've chosen the murder victim, and they say, um, they say that they've chosen a murder that will cause chaos and stir the pot. And I'm like jumping ahead a little bit, right? If you're listening to this episode, you know what happens. They are psyching us out because they murdered Lisa. Lisa's murder absolutely does not cause chaos and stir the pot. So either me and Charlotte are just being told, say something exciting, say something interesting about who you've murdered, or the editors are just faking us out and they've picked that from somewhere else or something.
Yeah, I think everyone was pretty convinced that Lisa was a faithful, so it wouldn't really cause any suspicion that a traitor would want to then murder someone who was a pretty solid faithful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's time for breakfast then, and Freddie and Charlotte arrive first. They notice that the table is literally, it must be literally a smaller table now, not just that there's fewer seats, because everybody who comes in comments on it. So it's funny. They must have just this extra table at some point. They're like, okay, bring in the small table now.
Or maybe
Um,
they have a sort of a carpenter who just like saws a bit off at the start of each day. Maybe that's their whole job. They're just hacking away.
Maybe, yeah. And this it's just become so obvious now. They're like, wait a minute, something's different. We finally noticed. Um, Freddie is eyeing up Leon and Mina as his top two suspects, and he tells Charlotte she's one of his 100%. He says, I know you shouldn't have 100% people, but I totally trust you. And she just goes, yeah. Like maybe she said it back. Maybe she went, yeah, you too. But if she did, they've cut it out. Um, Alexander, Leon, and Frankie are next. Leon's still annoyed about the round table last night. He says this thing in his little his interview. He goes, do you lot know what you're going to miss when I'm gone? And I thought, nothing. I'm sorry. That's very cruel. And Leon seems like a very nice man, but
Savage.
I don't think they're going to miss that much. I'm sorry. So, apart from his friendship, obviously. Joe and Mina are
And his
next.
fatherly presence as well is a
Yes,
big
of course.
aspect.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's a father figure, of course, of course. Uh, Joe and Mina are next, and here's where I think it's weird because, as I said a few minutes ago, the end of the last episode implied that Joe was one of the three people they were really considering for murder. So you would think he's one of the last people to come in, but Joe arrives quite early with Mina, so they've kind of like mixed things up a bit here. And actually,
It's that
Leanne ends
classic.
up being one of the ones that we're waiting to find
Mm,
out about.
well, it's that classic sort of plot hole in it that sort of always leaving the three most suspected, uh, the three faithfuls who the
Yeah,
traitors most wanted to murder or were considering until the end.
yeah,
That you do hope that episode by episode they're going to mix it up a little bit. Otherwise, someone might clock on to the fact that that's
yeah,
happening.
yeah,
And it wasn't such a huge mix up, but maybe they've just thought we can't kind of keep that to be such a regular trope. Someone's going
yeah,
to suss it out.
yeah. I think only once this whole series, Mina was in one of the final groups that came in. But yeah, this is just a little bit of a change to the normal. And I don't think it's a big deal. I just noticed it. I thought, wait a minute, why are we waiting for Leanne when she wasn't one of the considerations? But hey, um, I just want to take a moment to say I'm so conflicted on Joe. I've gone on like a roller coaster with my feelings about Joe as a TV character, which continues in this
Mm.
episode. Like earlier on, I thought he was quite rude sometimes. I didn't really warm to him, but now I he's said some funny things the past few episodes. Everyone else seems to really like him, like the other players like him. And now I see him as like very childlike. Sometimes when he's talking in his interviews, he seems quite timid and he's like a little kid that's been forced on stage to like the nativity play, and he doesn't really know if he should be there. And he says this
That's
really funny
interesting.
thing in his interview. He goes, "We're all sat so close. We have to be very careful what we say."
I think it's the way he says things rather than what he's saying sometimes that is quite jarring. It's so deadpan and dry that it makes maybe some things that he's saying maybe would be quite normal. Just the way he says it flags it as unusual.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how
I
do you,
can't.
because you had high hopes for Joe, I feel, because he was an English teacher, you were an
I
English
know.
teacher. Have you not felt that kinship?
No, I haven't felt that kinship. Yeah, at first I was like, oh, an English teacher. I'm on side with him. And now I sort of don't really care what happens to Joe, actually.
No.
So I think he seems like a nice man and he says some really funny things at times. But again, round table, he then begins to really annoy me again tonight, but we shall get there. The players are looking at all the portraits on the wall. Charlotte says she can't wait to have a red X through that hideous pic. And I agree that all of the pictures are not that flattering. And Mina, we cut to Mina and when one of her confessionals saying Charlotte's doing a great job. If I was doing a performance review, I would say she is outstanding. So seems like Mina's on board with Charlotte, and maybe that's not a good thing, but we'll find out.
Maybe not a good thing for Mina.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Joe and Frankie are focusing on the fact that they, along with Charlotte, are still in the game. They become really obsessed with this in this episode. Like, why are the three of us here? Are we? There must be a reason. Is it one of us? Is one of us the traitor? Or are we close to a traitor? And Joe
I never get
wants.
that theory. the being like, why am I still here? Why am I still here? I mean, someone's got to be there.
Well,
It's
you're
it's
right.
quite a self-centered idea, sort of going from your personal experience in the game and just being like, why am I, it must be revolving around me in some way.
Yeah, it's sometimes I understand it, and sometimes I think they get too carried away with it. The why me, why us? I think what they think is we've never really had lots of attention at the round table. Nobody's really voted for us much. Like Frankie's had a couple of votes along the way. Charlotte had some votes like maybe 5 or 6 episodes ago, and not really ever since. So I think they're thinking no one's really suspicious of us. No one's voting for us. Why haven't we been murdered yet? Because the traitors probably can't use us to banish. But yeah, I think you're right that they become like hyper focused on it. And you're right. So they still need 9 people in the game, so you can't all be murdered. Um, so yeah, I think they do become a bit obsessive about it sometimes. And Joe even says, "I'm going to talk about this at the round table tonight." It means that Jake, Leanne, and Lisa are the last three that we're waiting for. Again, the viewers know that Leanne's probably coming back because the creators didn't really discuss her last night. So it's only going to be Jake or Lisa, probably. The door knocks, and in comes Jake with Leanne behind him, and it means that Lisa is the murdered player. So we flash back very, very briefly to the traitors, just say they think she's too observant. She's starting to notice too much, and that kind of seems to be it. Like you said, I think as viewers, we sort of probably knew Lisa's time was up. It's not really as if we were just kind of waiting for it. Lisa gets her letter. She says she saw it coming, and she gives this classic murder victim line from the traitors that she thinks it's because she was a threat. She's like, I think they saw me as a threat. I mean, it's a little bit true, but probably probably not mega true. Um,
Yeah. I
she
did
she
like I did like that Lisa very fittingly wore a shirt with little flying owls on, though. I think very fitting in the sort of Scottish traitors theme, and it's a good way to go.
yeah.
Stylish.
It is, and she also fulfills her role of being, the priest character by saying, "There may be no second coming from me, but I'll be seeing them on the other side." And I think Lisa should be cancelled because that was blasphemous, and I can't stand for that. So that's what I'm saying. I'm kidding. So back at breakfast, Leon thinks that he's just like the traitor. Oh my God, they got rid of a priest. The traitors need to repent. I mean, he's kidding. It's quite funny. Frankie is apologising because last night she was quite hard for Alex at the round table and got it all wrong. Leanne, meanwhile, is very suspicious of Frankie now. She thinks Frankie's overplaying it. She's portraying these fake emotions. Jake, sort of in a quite anticlimactic moment, reveals that he had the shield last night. And sort of like, I don't think much ever came of that. It doesn't really. No one
I
cares, I
think
don't
it
think that.
was. I was wondering if they were going to follow down that theory of which team in the last challenge had the protection from hiding the existence of the shield, and then try and follow that theory on, who was in which team, and does that then mean that it's more likely there are traitors in one team than the other?
Yeah.
But they didn't really kind of go down that theory at all. They didn't even sort of look at that or consider it, and they just quite quickly moved on. So I think something more could have been made from it. It was a bit of a shame that no one kind of thought of that and brought it up.
Yeah, I thought the same. I thought watching the last episode it was gonna play a really big part. Maybe they'll come back to it next episode, but yeah, it sort of drifted away without much consequence, I thought. Claudia arrives then just to tell them that they should say a little prayer for Lisa and gives them their daily clue about what the mission is going to be by saying, "Let me just do a quick head count." And they all, theorize about what that might mean. So we spread it around the castle. We leave breakfast. What's everybody talking about? Charlotte talks to Alexander. It seems like she's trying to get him on side because of what Frankie and Joe were just saying at breakfast. Charlotte thinks, are they going to start looking at me? I need to do something about this. So Charlotte is suggesting to Alexander that she might be suspicious of Frankie. Obviously, we know she's faking it all. And she says in her interview here something that she sort of repeatedly says in the episode. I feel like if my name is going down, I want to make sure seeds are sown about Mina too. So Charlotte is like, yeah, she's secretly gunning for Mina. She kind of has been doing since she was recruited.
She's not
Um,
about the sisterhood. She's going for the backstab.
she is, and it's just so. I mean, and I think she absolutely should play it like that. Like, I'm not complaining that she's doing that. I'm just being biased because I like Mina so much and I want Mina to win. But I'm worried now that Mina is fooled by Charlotte and is too caught up in the sisterhood. And I don't know why Mina's been so open to Charlotte coming in and they're going to make it to the end together. I'm worried.
I like the way Mina's been playing it so far, and that it's just something we haven't quite seen before, that she's being quite honest and open with the traitors and quite even when Linda went, she told her in advance, is it all right? She kind of asked almost Linda's permission, can I vote for you? And it's a different kind of tactic, and it's been working for her so far. But obviously, as Charlotte's come in at such a late stage, she doesn't know any of those discussions that went on before. She's seen Mina vote for Linda in the past, and she wants to cover her own back and has clearly seen how other traitors have played it in the past. And I think that in itself, I'm with you. It's a real shame. I don't want to see Mina go, but I think it's going to contribute to quite an interesting dynamic between the two in what they're saying to each other's faces and then what they're
Yeah.
saying in their private interviews.
Yeah, it's definitely leading up to an exciting final three episodes. Like I can't wait to see
Mm.
how it all plays out next week, whether it goes the way that I want it to or not. They're definitely leading us in that really exciting direction. There's a really funny little scene here outside where they're playing badminton. It's so sort of like British and like Enid Blyton. We've got Leanne and Alexander and Charlotte. And Leanne and Charlotte like hint to one another that they both got someone new in mind, but they don't know whether they should say it. And so they decide to do like a one, two, three reveal, which kind of doesn't really go the way I think Charlotte thinks it's gonna go. They go one, two, three. Mina, Frankie. Oh yeah, Frankie. Like I know we just said it, but it's so funny that Charlotte is like she's just gonna
Straight
say
away.
Mina's right. I'm just gonna go for Mina right now, and then goes, oh no, I was just saying Frankie a minute ago, and it seems
Mm.
like they move along from they don't really talk about Mina. Maybe they do, they just don't show us it. I don't know. Um, but
But
they
she's
talk about
planted that seed.
well,
That's all
she
she needed to
has
do. Yeah.
exactly, I guess so. And we cut to Alexander saying he doesn't see the Frankie thing. He really trusts her. He'll be really surprised if it's her. And back in the garden of the badminton, he trusts his instincts, closes his eyes, and leaps into a giant bush. He defies gravity. Off he goes. Well, he doesn't defy it for very long. It's like it's like bizarre.
One of my favorite moments of the series, I think.
What is he doing? Like just jumping into this like giant bush.
It's a bright yellow bush. I mean, it's hard to miss.
Classic
Yeah.
Alexander. Apparently. Um, we've got Freddie talking to Joe and Frankie. He is convinced that Leon is a traitor. They all agree that they don't really suspect Charlotte. They're like, surely not. Although Frankie is still sort of like, well, but is she the person that's tricking me the most? Could it be? Freddie then brings up Mina. He's saying, well, Anna voted for Mina. And then Anna was murdered the next day. He's always had a bit of a question over her. He's not told she's one of his unsure people. And then we cut to Mina in her interview, again talking about Charlotte, saying she always thought she would like to just go to the end, be just the one traitor, but now she thinks she and Charlotte they can do it, they can split the money. Yeah, again, I'm as a fan of Mina, I hate hearing her say these things. I'm so worried she's dooming herself. And
It feels like you're seeing the sort of start of her downfall, which is quite sad.
yeah, again, unless like we said before, it's complete um, sort of misdirection. Maybe and I said this before on one of the most recent podcast episodes, maybe Mina's had such an easy run so far that the producers reckoned, well, we can't just have someone be a traitor, be really good at it, and get all the way to the end and win. We have to present the suggestion that she's in trouble at some point. So maybe this is all a bit of fake danger, and actually Mina's going to be fine. But I can't read it. I'm still very worried that she's saying these things because she's not saying them in front of other people. Like she's saying it in the interviews, which makes me think, oh, she really believes this.
Yeah.
So,
When she's saying it in private, that's she's open to sort of completely roll out her game plan, her strategies. So, we have to believe that she's being totally honest. Uh, and her game plan is to sort of share the monies, have the sisterhood, and sort of get to the end, not as the sole winner.
Yeah.
I mean, the moment that she was in the tower alone, she said it was quite lonely, and you know didn't want to play it that way. And um so this is what she's gunning for, I suppose. It'll be interesting to see if she does have to change her tactics down the line. But so far, she's totally oblivious to her name getting brought up.
Yeah.
Um,
And of course everything can change so quickly in the game, and we don't know when she might have made those comments in the interviews like on Charlotte's first day as a traitor. Maybe they're taking all of the clips from that first day or the second day. Maybe things will change very quickly over the next day or two, and suddenly Mina will wake up and realize something's going on. So it definitely is all still to play for. Right, we are very much at the
Absolutely.
mercy of the edit.
Absolutely. And even if someone's name gets brought up and suspicion is growing around them throughout an episode, it just takes one odd comment from someone that for everyone to jump on, as we saw in the banishment in the previous episode, with Alex, who
Yeah.
he was faithful, and a small thing he said that it wasn't meant to sound weird in any sense. He was just putting a theory out there. Everyone saw it as a slip up, and any other theories from that episode sort of fall away, and it's kind of all in on one person. So it's exciting. Anything can happen.
Yes. It's time for the mission then, and in the jeeps on the way there, everyone is pretty much focused on getting a shield. There are only 9 people left at this point, so the chances of being murdered are getting higher and higher. But they realize the traitors are going to want to try and get a shield too, to appear faithful and to stop anyone else from getting it. So they arrive to this big pile of stone statue parts. It's very Easter Island, and they notice their names are on all of the statue heads. Claude arrives. Claude. I'm sorry, like Claudia. I'm just calling her Claude now. Claude. Me and Claude. Um, my old pal Claude tells them that at the top of the hill are 5 plinths, and they have to build the statues on all 5 of the plinths, and if they do, they'll earn £10,000. However, and they have to do all of it or they get nothing. However, one of the plinths has a shield attached to it. Whoever puts their statue head with their name on it on that plinth will win the shield. Um, this is a slight spoiler, not really about anything important, I don't think. Just about US traitors. So skip ahead 30 seconds if you don't want to hear anything about US traitors. Just to say that they have just done the same mission in their season, which is airing right now in the States. And it was carnage there. None of them wanted to discuss things. They didn't want to do a vote. A couple of players were like, "Oh, maybe we should think about who we want to." And everyone else they just grabbed the statues. They were running up that hill like Kate Bush, and like they were unabashedly in it for themselves. It was wild. At least here, the players have like a bit of a chat, and Freddie's saying, "Well, can I get the shield because I have not had one?" And I was one of the people away back in that Viking boat mission who got off on the raft. And he says, and the other 2 people who did that who are still here, you've both had shields. I think it's Jake and Charlotte. Could be Jake and Mina. Um, and it's Jake's one of them anyway. And we've got Joe in his interview saying, I really want a shield too. I've never had one. And they kind of don't really make a decision. They agree, let's just get the bodies up and we'll make the decision at the end. And I thought, what? Just decide now. Like this, you're just going to make this worse. Just pick someone now and focus on that. Joe says the same thing. He says we should have just decided then and there who we were going to give the shield to and then worked together to get it done. So it does
I
create the
love what Joe
perfect.
says. I love what Joe says in his private interview when sort of Freddie says he wants the shield, and Joe's sort of going, "Well, I'm also going to go for the shield." And he's like, "What's the point in putting money in the bank if you can't withdraw it?" I'm not good at the accent, so if you want to have a go at doing that in a faithful uh, representation of Joe, you're welcome
Yeah, he
to.
says, "What's the point in putting money in the bank if I can't withdraw it?" But
Perfect.
it's very English teacher of him to use a metaphor, isn't it?
Absolutely. You would know.
And it's the perfect because they don't make a decision. It's the perfect chance for someone to just be like, "Well, I'm just going to do my own thing," which Leanne kind of ends up doing, and it causes a bit of a problem. I can we just talk about the elephant in the room? And when I say
Yes,
elephant, I mean the giant penis
phallus.
statues. We can't ignore it.
What's
Uh,
going on? Someone's had a lot of fun with this.
I hadn't watched the I wasn't watching the episode live. I was sort of a bit delayed on it, and someone sent me a listener sent me a message on Instagram saying someone had a lot of fun with these shapes, and I was like, oh, what's they must be doing a task to do with like shapes, and then I watched it and
Yeah.
I thought, oh God. Immediately, I just took some pictures and went straight to Instagram stories to say, like, is anyone else seeing this? And yes, it's all over social media. It's like they surely during production, someone was like, these look a bit strange. Is it too late to do anything about it?
You'd
Or
think maybe when the heads are on the bodies, maybe that's how they kind of envisioned it to begin with, and it looks totally normal. And as soon as you decapitate them, their bodies are quite suspicious. Maybe it was
yeah.
too late, and they're like, we've already built these like beautiful, huge statues. We can't change it now. Uh,
Yeah, or maybe they just were like, do you know what? If it gets us more little clips on social media and goes viral, maybe it's not a bad thing.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was kind of accidentally on purpose.
Yeah,
But it did make it funny watching them like lug those things up the hill, carrying one either end. It was quite amusing to watch.
yeah. Especially, yeah, Alexander is like powering ahead and he's sort of helping everyone out. I wondered, like, we know he was an ex-diplomat. Was he also a spy? Is he an assassin? Is that why he's so good at this? He's very physically capable. I think there's even more to the story. Uh, we
Wow.
and
Are you telling me he's an assassin? Is this your lie? Or are
no,
you
it's no, no,
just
no. Just a thought. I'm just putting out
just a
there.
thought?
Just a thought, an opinion that doesn't count. Um, Along the same lines, Leanne, we know that she's this ex army trained person. She is very fit, so she's trying to hide how good she is at this as well. But yeah, it looks really grueling. Jake then tells Alexander about his cerebral palsy, and there's a bit of his sort of confessional content too. He talks about growing up really self-conscious and says that people don't often realize that he has this. And talks about being more confident now. He can talk to people about it. Played in a football team, so it's like this really nice moment to get a bit of insight into Jake. Although, again, reading things cynically, I suspect he is going to get murdered next episode, and so this was kind of his last moment
Oh,
to
so that's
like include
why
this,
you've got this
maybe,
heart to heart in here. Yeah.
possibly. Yeah,
It is
uh,
always as soon as you get to hear a little bit more about someone's life, you're like, oh, so sorry, that's you. Looks like
yeah,
that's you gone, doesn't it?
yeah. Not
It's
not always, but sometimes
not
I feel
always.
like that is a pattern. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking Jake might not be around for much longer.
They were having this heart to heart in the middle of a timed challenge, just casually strolling down the hill. I was like, run, go. They didn't look stressed at all.
That's very true, but it just affirms my long-held theory that they're not. I don't know if they're really being timed. And actually, when they were having that conversation, it was kind of raining a bit. But the rest of the mission, I couldn't see rain. I think we're being played with.
You had
And
your suspicions. Mm.
yeah, and Claudia even tells them there's only 20 minutes left. No one's got heads on the statues yet. No one's made any decisions about what to do. And so then they kind of start to discuss it. Freddie's saying, well, me, Alexander, Frankie, and Joe have never had shields. And then Leanne just jumps in and goes, but I think Frankie's a traitor. And just quite openly. Leanne then just decides she's just going to do her own thing. She takes the statue of her, not the statue of her head, the head of a statue with her name on it. It doesn't look like her. And off she goes. The thing is, that should she should be absolutely allowed to do that. Like it's a game, it's competitive. You're trying to get yourself to the end. It's just not a good look to the other people. So I think you always need to remember. It's a social game. It's the same thing with Dan a few episodes back. Like Dan was playing the game very selfishly and was very vocal about that, but I think his mistake was to keep telling everyone that. Because so much of this game that determines whether or not you get to the end is the votes at the round table. And you have to remember, as human beings who are doing the voting, they're probably much less likely to vote for someone that they don't warm to, that they don't think is playing as a team. So I don't think Leanne's doing herself any favors by so conspicuously just giving up on what they're doing and going off to save her, especially when she's had at least two shields already. So I think that's really going to bother people.
Yeah, I think a good tactic is always to play as a team, and obviously the sort of previous earlier seasons, that was much easier to do, particularly the first season.
Yeah,
There wasn't an option that everyone was going towards one shared goal, and it's what I particularly love about this season and how many different ways each challenge can bring out different characteristics in people because there emerge different motivations throughout the challenge. Obviously, we had our first ever sort of traitors sabotaging a challenge earlier on in the series, and then we've all often got maybe fighting for a shield, and that brings out more kind of selfish motivations in people. And even if it doesn't necessarily, like you say, scream traitor or should kind of arise any suspicions that someone's a traitor, it does just make people a bit more unlikable to their peers
yeah,
and cause more drama, which I have to admit, in the first season, I would skip through the challenges a little bit sometimes. And in this season, I've watched all the way through every single one.
yeah,
They really add to everything that then takes place outside of the challenges, which is what you want. They're kind of a bit more integral to the show now.
yeah.
I look forward to them now. They're really exciting.
I agree that I've enjoyed the missions much, much more this season and felt there there's more jeopardy in them or there's more of a reason to pay attention to them. You've just reminded me, I'm going to jump back a little bit because I've just been I've had this on my mind. 3 or 4 episodes ago, they did the challenge with the clown that came out and popped the balloon, and they had to
Yeah.
go through sort of levels of not a maze, but they had options of doors, and they had to just. And at the time, I on the podcast was like, "Oh, this is just like a really sort of silly mission. I don't really care about it." And in retrospect, I thought actually there was still a great opportunity there for traitors to sabotage things that I hadn't really considered. And the traitors, I don't think they didn't try and do it. It was still Linda and Mina at the time. But they could have, I mean, if Linda and Mina had been a pair and gone in with their balloon, they could have just made up stuff that they were describing to everybody. So they could have fooled with them that way. Or even just one of the traitors on their own with a faithful could have deliberately described things in a bad way or known
That's a
which
good
door to
point.
go through.
I also haven't thought of that. I was similar to you. It wasn't my favorite challenge. I didn't feel like we got much out of it. But now you're saying that, I feel maybe it was built to have the opportunity uh, for there to be some kind of deception in it.
Yeah,
But it just didn't play out that way.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Back to this mission. They get to the top of the hill. They're going to make their decision. Leanne gets a bit stroppy about them not picking her, but fairly enough because they say, well, you've had two shields already, come on. And they do this vote that Jake takes charge of. We I had to watch it a couple of times to really get through everybody. We hear most of their votes, not everybody. Charlotte says, well, I would like Joe to get it. That's why I carried his statue head up. Alexander goes Freddie, as does Joe votes for Frankie. Frankie votes for Joe. And Mina and Leon both say Freddie. Joe's livid. Um, because Leon's his friend, they're really close. Leon said he doesn't trust Freddie, so Joe's like, "Why are you going to give him the shield over me?" He's really annoyed about it. They don't really fully show who Freddie votes for or who Leanne or Jake pick, but it seems like Freddie ends up with the most votes, whatever happens. So they put his head on the shield plinth and they win their £10,000. Um, so Freddie's very happy about this. And Claudia makes a little joke at Alexander again. She just goes, Alexander, who are you? Because he's been so great at the challenge. Uh, Back in the Jeeps, Freddie is focusing on Leon and Frankie. And Charlotte again throws Mina's name out. She goes, oh, remember you've been thinking about Mina? And we don't see the conversation go anywhere, but like you said, I think she's just anywhere she can, just saying Mina's name, even if it's just for a moment, to keep it on Freddie's mind. In the other Jeep, Frankie then starts talking about Leanne, and this becomes really important. She's saying, Leanne carried her own head up the hill, and some people work as a team, implying that Leanne isn't working as a team. And then she says, oh, it could just be that she's a faithful that really wants a shield, or, a traitor could do the same thing. That's all we see her say about it. And we do see Frankie in her interview saying, I wouldn't have dreamt of taking my own head up there. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but she takes it very seriously.
No. And it does develop into a bit of a drama, doesn't it? It's such a small act, but sometimes I think, especially in this season where people don't really know where to go, you people have to sort of clutch onto something. And that seems to be the moment. It's all it takes is someone to do something a little
Yeah,
bit out of the ordinary or a little bit bold, and people are like, well, if you have the confidence to carry your own head up the hill, you must have some kind of qualities that a traitor possesses.
yeah,
And that's it. Once you've got, it's not evidence in any way, but it's the most solid thing, I suppose, that they can hold on to at this point.
yeah. And actually, I think it actually informs what ends up happening at the round table. Like, I think this, again, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but if we're listening to this podcast, we know what happened. This is all part of why Leon ends up banished, I think. Uh,
Mm.
so back at the castle, Leon tells Leanne and Freddie. Well, first of all, he says he's like, "I'm not playing games anymore." I thought you literally are playing a game. And then he says everyone's being too nicey. He's like, he's not having it. He's just gonna like go right for it tonight. He talks again in his interview about his family, why he's doing this. He's proud to be a dad, all that stuff.
Which
And
is a red flag that maybe he doesn't have long left, isn't it?
yeah, I totally
Yeah.
misread it in the previous episode. I was like, or maybe 2 episodes ago, we got a bit of this from Leon, and I was saying, oh, he's getting the finalist edit. He's going all the way to the end.
Mm.
But actually, no, yeah, I think maybe it's the opposite. It's making us feel warmed to Leon just so that they can banish him, and we're shocked about it. He he then tells Leanne about the Frankie situation. He says, questions were asked in the Jeep about why you had brought your head up the hill. That's all we see Leon say as well. We don't see him say a lot more. He probably did say more than that. We don't see it, but Leanne gets really pissed off about it. She goes to Frankie in the library. She's asking, "Is someone fuming with me?" And they're like, "No, we're not fuming with you. We didn't say that." And she's going, "Do you think I'm selfish? What's the issue?" They hash it out a bit. If anything, actually, before Leanne walked in, funnily enough, it's Charlotte who used the word selfish. She says, "Oh, I wouldn't be as selfish as that." And then Leanne comes in
Mm.
and she's like, "We never called you selfish. Oh God, we would never say that." But she actually kind of did. And
I thought that as well. And I thought anyone in the room with her at that moment, if they'd noticed that and how easily she turned it around and lied, that would be something to pick up on. But no one actually did at that time.
no. And Frankie then asks, out of interest, who you said that to you? And of course, Leanne says, Leon. And Joe, in his sassy way, goes, "Oh, surprise, surprise." That was again totally not Joe's accent. I'm sorry, Joe. Um, and I just laughed when he said that. He just has these
It's
little
it's a
moments.
classic Joe line.
Yeah. It's just so funny because we know Leon is not a traitor, and Joe's like, "Oh, classic traitor Leon." So at this point, it's not looking good for Leon. If this is what the episode is focusing in on, it's a worrying sign. Frankie even goes to the kitchen and talks to some other people about what Leon's just done. So it's obviously a big deal. We get a little bit back in the library with Jake. He says he's leaning towards Frankie, and he says if he had to pick nailed on faithfuls, he'd say Charlotte, Mina, and Joe, which is very interesting. So he's not.
It's great for our traitors.
It is, and he's not the great traitor hunter that everybody thinks he is, even though he caught Linda straight away. He's way off track at this
You
point.
wonder if this could offer some protection if people do kind of listen to him more as a traitor hunter now, maybe by protecting Charlotte and Mina. Maybe they have a little bit longer in this game, thanks to that.
Yeah,
It's a good sign for the traitors.
yeah, definitely. And now Joe asks Leon about his beef. He's saying, "Hey, why didn't you vote for me to get the shield?" I just, I just find this whole thing funny because it's relatively petty. It's not
Yeah.
really that. I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. I get that if Joe thinks Leon could be a traitor, maybe there's something in it. But he's just so annoyed about it on a personal level. I don't really fully buy Leon's defense. I don't know. Like, he says, "Oh, I didn't hear anyone voting for you. I didn't know I could have chosen you." I thought, how did you not hear the whole conversation? And even if no one else picked you, why didn't you just say, "Oh, I would rather Joe got it"? Like, it's weird.
Yeah. I have to admit I found this particular discussion like slightly tricky to follow. Um, I just have written down here the sort of Joe, Leon, Freddie, Frankie issue. They were just sort of talking about exactly who voted for who sort of the previous night, and obviously there's like the new gripes with Leon and I got a bit lost. I have to admit I had to watch it two or three times to be like, what's everyone saying here exactly?
What they're talking about is not a round table vote. It's the vote and the mission for who they wanted to get the
Right.
shield. So
Oh, of
Joe's
course. That must be where I was getting lost.
it is
I
confusing because
Yeah.
they're talking about votes. Yeah, it is. I also was struggling a bit here, but they're talking about the mission and how when Jake was saying, right,
Okay.
who do we want to get the shield? Leon picks Freddie, and Joe is like, "You're my friend. I'm really close to you. You said, why do you want him to get the shield rather than me?" So that Joe's really annoyed about it, and
Yeah.
he even and again he has this like funny line delivery in his interview where he goes, "There appear to be some crossed wires," and like it just makes me see him as like this little boy. Like it's funny. Um, yeah, Leon is saying, "No, Joe, like I'm close to you. I totally trust you. I would have given you the shield if I thought I could have." And again, I thought you could have just said something. I don't really understand. So,
I
time for
like that
the
Joe then says he thinks Leon is doing a Linda and pretending to be confused. I love that just doing a Linda has become a thing.
become a thing.
A bit of
Yeah.
bad acting. Not, well, award deserving, but very dramatic acting.
And you thought we weren't going to get the chance to talk about Linda in this episode. She's still with us.
She's still with us,
Yeah,
and the people in the game are still talking about her.
exactly. How could you forget?
Yeah.
She even gets a mention at round table as well. Uh,
Mm.
so we heading into the round table. We've got our voiceovers, our interview clips. Leon saying that he can't afford to be quiet tonight. He knows his name's in the frame, and then there's this seemingly random clip of Mina that terrifies me as a Mina stan. She goes, I don't really hear me name. I'd be, I'd be shocked if I was banished tonight." And I'm like, why are they showing us a clip of Mina saying she'd be so I thought, oh my God, is she about to get banned? Like, I was terrified. I didn't know what was going to
Mm.
happen. So, because all going into the round table, they always show us little clips of the people who are up for discussion and are going to
Yeah.
get votes. So I was like, why has Mina suddenly been shown here? This is awful. Claudia speaks to them. The prize pot at this point is £58,500, and she gives them a warning. After tonight, you will only have two more roundtables that result in the banished person telling you whether or not they're a faithful or a traitor. And at the final episode, they'll stop doing that. They'll be banished and they'll just walk off. So the pressure's on. Things are getting really intense. Leon starts. He apologizes to Joe about this mix-up with the shield and the mission. Says he's looking at Frankie now, and notices that she didn't vote for a traitor either time. For Edith, she didn't vote for Linda when it was Linda. She didn't vote for Armani when she was banished. And Frankie sort of gives a reasonable defense and says, "Well, I don't vote for traitors because I don't know who they are."
I thought
Um,
that was fair enough. I thought she defended herself fairly well.
Yeah, and she even says, like, I acknowledge last night I was so wrong about Alex. I feel terrible about it. She then goes on to ask Leon, why did you tell Leanne what I had been saying? Like, why were you sort of spreading rumors? And Leon gets defensive and he said, I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. Or he uses the word sabotage. He says, I wasn't doing anything sabotagey. And he's like, I don't hide away from anything. Like, I want to get everything out there. I want to look at everybody. Freddie wonders why Leon was so resistant to vote for Linda for so long. He's saying Jake kept talking about Linda. Why you and Jake get on? Why didn't you ever listen to him? And Leon is just sort of vaguely saying, "Oh, I just couldn't get on board with Linda. I couldn't imagine it." He says Jake and Charlotte are the only two people that he fully trusts, which is interesting. Um,
Another tick for Charlotte.
yes. And
Mhm.
he says he's probably going to go for Frankie tonight unless something dramatically changes. Jake steps in and he is coming for Frankie as well. He talks about how he came to the other night, kind of accused her in a way, asked her why she was still here. And he says that there was panic in her eyes, the same panic as he saw in Linda. See, Linda's like she's fully still here in spirit. Um,
Very memorable. Clearly, all of her moments are very resonant in their minds,
absolutely.
as in ours.
Yes. And Frankie says, "Well, you're the first person who'd really come and spoke to me one-on-one like that and kind of accused me. So yeah, I look panicked." She says that she looks panicked a lot. She said, "I'm also confused about why I'm still in the game. I can't even really answer that." Uh, Charlotte steps in to get involved in this whole discussion about her and Joe and Frankie, and she's saying, "I don't get this. Like, we're not even that close." She says, "We've not hung out for days. Like today at the mission was the most time we've spent together recently." Joe's saying he's torn between Leon and Alexander. Alexander, he says, you went for Freddie. I think he means you voted for Freddie to get a shield in the mission. And then they also have this like really like petty argument, which it just made me laugh because Joe just gets so like caught up in things, and Alexander is kind of able to like laugh them off a bit. So Alexander briefly starts to explain that in the mission, he was like, "Well, I was exhausted. I wasn't really thinking clearly." And Joe just cuts him off and goes, "Oh, we're not doing the exhausted, hazy, confused act." Like, Joe, so salty.
I thought that was a bit uncalled for, especially as Alexander did pull his weight in the mission. Even
Yeah.
Claudia mentioned it, and what Claudia says goes. So Joe's going against both Alexander and Claudia there, I would say.
hmm
It's an unpopular stance to take that he's putting on a bit of an act with how exhausted he was.
Yes. And I mean, I'm sure Joe is probably a really nice guy, but he just sometimes makes these terrible comments to people that they're not a good look. So he and Alexander bicker a little bit. Alexander's like, well, actually, I had been up and down that hill about 4 times. It's quite reasonable for me to say that I was exhausted. And he's like, I would have happily given you a shield. All I knew in that moment was Freddie hadn't had one. I just picked one of you. Like, there's really nothing behind it. And he goes on to say, I'm a bit stuck. And what he means is, I actually really don't know what I'm doing tonight. I don't know what to vote for. And it seems to kind of be echoed around the table that a lot of them just don't have a clue what to do tonight. And I guess it's a testament to how well the traitors are doing that neither Charlotte or Mina are like number one suspects that someone immediately came in to talk about. Alexander asks if anyone can like help him out. He says, "Does anyone got anything else they can bring? Any other names?" And Leanne and Jake are also like, "Yeah, someone bring something else." So Frankie steps in and says, "Right, let's look at maybe the least obvious place. Who's the most faithful? Surely it's Jake." She's saying, Jake, how could a traitor voted for Linda so early on? Like, surely it couldn't be you, but maybe it is you. Like, that doesn't totally mean you're faithful. We don't know what to think. And then Frankie's saying, I'm just going to bring up a name that hasn't really been brought to the table, but I have heard it, and sort of looks to Mina, and I'm panicking. And Mina goes, "What,
Mm.
my name?" And she said, "Well, I have had a vote, so I have had focus on me at the round table." And Frankie saying, "Well, you're very quiet usually, you don't really throw names out." And Mina saying, I spoke about Linda and Armani, both of them were traitors. I spoke about Dan and I was so upset about it. And Frankie's implying, well, I think you just jump on the bandwagon. I think other people throw out names and then you follow along. And
I
and
think
Mina,
just well, no, you keep going. I think I know what you're going to say.
you might, well, maybe it's the same thing that Mina then kind of takes the chance to come at, she says, well, I
Yeah,
mentioned Charlotte a while back. So I thought that was
I
quite
couldn't believe
interesting.
that. I thought it was a bit dangerous for her also she's named all traitors that there have ever been in that breath. You know,
Mm.
she's gone Armani, Linda, and Charlotte, all traitors known and unknown to the
Mm.
table, you know, besides herself. And I think it's quite a, you know, did she, maybe it was a little bit, you know, throwing out Charlotte's name, which she never has done from what we've seen kind of outside of that moment, you know, that no private discussions was she name dropping Charlotte. As far as we know, she's committed to sort of getting to the end with her. I don't know if it was almost more of a some kind of slip up. I don't
Mm.
know. You know, it just feels dangerous to put yourself in the position of knowing all the traitors because that can only mean you are a traitor. Obviously, at that point, they don't know Charlotte is, but it feels dangerous to associate herself with absolutely every traitor there has
Mm.
been so far.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought of it that way at all. But I see what you're saying. I I I think she'll probably get away with it. I think she was just pressed in that moment. Frankie's saying, "You've never just come and named someone." So she probably just like, "Well, I'm gonna have to say something." So she's like, "Well, I did say Charlotte that time, and Charlotte just happens to be a traitor." But yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that was danger. Maybe someone is gonna say, if they find out Charlotte's a traitor and they say, "Wait a minute, Mina mentioned her. Is that weird?" Yeah, could be.
Mm.
Freddie even jumps in to say, "Mina, yeah, you've always been in my unsure category." They argue back and forth, and it finishes with Mina just saying, "I can tell you right now, I'm a faithful." So she just sort of blatantly goes for the upfront lie. I'm freaking out because Claudia says the time for talk is over. So I was like, if they turn on Mina, I I can't have this. This is terrible.
It sometimes feels dangerous when the cutoff, I mean, I don't know if that's in reality or just in the edit, but the
Mm,
cutoff is directly after they finish talking about one particular person. Sometimes it feels like the weight is then on that person. It's the last name that's been brought up in everyone's minds. Is that the name
mm.
people are just gonna, is it the most easy one to then write down on the boards? So yeah, the panic was real at that point.
Yeah, it is tricky to tell. Did the discussion really end there? Is that just what it looks like? But yeah, it could be quite significant if Claudia's been told, I'm sure via an earpiece, like, right, stop them now. So the votes begin, and Charlotte is first. She votes for Leon. Jake goes for Frankie, and it sort of goes back and forth. Alexander goes for Leon, Mina goes for Frankie, and then it's Leanne, and she tips the scale slightly. She also votes for, I'm saying Frankie because they call her that, it's Francesca, and she says, "I'm going for you. I just don't know who else to go for. I've not heard anything else." And Frankie takes her a moment to say, "Well, you could bring names yourself. You don't have to wait on other people." Leon is next and also votes for Frankie. So you might think, oh, if Frankie's the one, she's going to go. She's building up the votes. But then it takes a bit of a turn because Frankie's next and she obviously can't vote for herself. So she votes for Leon. Joe's next and he votes for Leon. It makes it a tie. Oh, and I don't think we've had it this close before this
Mm.
series. It's that it's down to one person. Freddie's got the casting vote, the deciding vote. I wasn't paying attention to the time. Again, I was watching it on a bit of a delay, so I didn't know how long the episode had left. I wondered if there was going to be a cliffhanger here, and they were going to keep us waiting
Mm.
till next Wednesday to find out what Freddie was going to do. But they don't. There's still actually like 15 minutes
A
left.
lot of the
So,
episode left. Yeah.
so Freddie turns over his slate and he votes for Leon, which of course now means that Leon is banished. He stands. We've got Leanne crying. She didn't vote for him. He says, he says, I'm laughing because it's so over the top that he says, "Guys, I love you all, and I mean that proper from past to present." You've probably only known them for 10 days, so it's not that far in the past. And he says, "Don't be afraid to get it wrong because you'll never get it right." It's this sort of slightly vague statement. I think he just means like, you're going to have to throw some names out there, otherwise you're never going to catch the traitors. And of course, he reveals, "I am a faithful." Leanne's upset. Alexander's having like a meltdown.
I
Jake's
was surprised by Alexander's reaction.
yeah,
It didn't seem to kind of flag as suspicious to it. Well, you know, it wouldn't be suspicious. It didn't seem to flag as weird to anyone else at the time, but he was sort of like thumping the table. Like, yeah, he seemed very annoyed by that one.
yeah. I guess he had said that he was really struggling. He just didn't know what way to go, and maybe that roundtable had just gone on for such a long time with just frustration because no one really knew what to do. And so Alexander's finally picked someone and he's got it wrong. And he's just like, oh my God, I can't believe after all that, I still messed it up. Um, I I wonder if it makes Mina look a little bit better than Charlotte at this point because Mina didn't vote for Leon, whereas Charlotte did. So Charlotte's just voted for someone, and I know no one really suspects Charlotte at this point, but I just thought it could be something that Mina uses later to, if she comes under suspicion next time, she could say, well, I didn't vote out Leon last time. Like, look at all the people who did vote him out. Isn't that more
Yeah.
suspicious than what I've just done? So I don't know.
He was quite a well-loved person in the group as well. So it could be something that could bring up some emotions, especially from people maybe like Leanne, who was quite close
Yeah,
to him.
yeah. Claudia then tells them that it's not time to leave just yet. They're going to have dinner. She says they need a pick me up. And they're all very excited about it. Off they go, and
Very
as
surprised by it as well. I don't think they
yeah,
expected, if there is some, like in the last season, the dinner party was with a lot fewer people. I think it was the final four. So I don't think they were expecting some kind of reward or celebration at this point.
yeah,
So pleasantly surprised by a dinner party.
yeah, it is interesting. I and I think lots of people, including me, I thought, oh, there's going to be. It's not just the dinner party. There's a twist. Something
Yeah.
terrible is going to happen. You know, in the first series, we had Maddie. It was, I think, she was offered money to leave. They said you can take £5,000
Yeah.
or three or something and leave right now. In the last New Zealand season, we had something like this with a dinner, and it was like the last person to leave the table ended up as being the murder victim. So I was very suspicious. It doesn't, nothing comes of it. It's just, it's a very sort of Big Brother final week. So Big Brother UK, usually in the final week, they do a scene like this, and they have them all toast that they made it to the final, and they all cry and get emotional. So it's yeah, it's kind of just a chance for us to get to know them a bit better. Before we even sit down at the table, though, we just get a couple of moments of people leaving the round table and whispering to each other. Leanne's saying to Mina that she's saying, "I think it's Joe." Freddie is saying to Joe, "It's Mina. It's got to be." And Frankie is pleading with Jake, and she's like, "There, it's got to be something that we're missing. There must be something like we've all been blindsided by. There's something so
She
major."
she says there has to be more names. We're missing something major. I was like, more names, like secret players hiding in the cupboards or under the sofa. I think all the names are there.
Yeah, there only are like eight of you now, 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's also like, well then Francesca, say it, go around everybody and say their name, and I don't know. Um, so at the dinner, everyone, yeah, they're all talking about their backgrounds, their motivations, why are they here, what would they do with the money, and Charlotte talks. I'll just sort of go through each of them briefly. Charlotte talks about going on a safari. She talks about having trouble conceiving. I'm already like tearing up. I'm like, oh God, poor Charlotte. Like, I thought it was really moving. If Freddie's talking about his
It's an
mum,
emotional segment.
yeah, and I am
Yeah.
like, I will cry at the drop of a hat. So I'm like in floods of tears, just like, oh, these people, oh God.
I have to admit, the thing I was most sad about though was that I didn't get to sit and eat some of that cheese board. Did you see the cutaway to the cheese board? It looked incredible. The cabin bear. Oh, I, I I do love the cutaways in Traitors generally. You know, when I think in the last episode we had a cutaway to like a deer with Claudia's fringe. I mean, that was incredible. But just that beautiful cheese board, it almost tops it for me because it looks so good.
I'm like, oh. Her Freddie's got this single mom and he wants to pay off her debts, and you're like, that cheese board, man.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
also have, a soul and was, tearing up at the other people's stories, but
Okay,
the cheese board
maybe
really caught my eye.
I don't eat cheese, as you know, so maybe that just was a blind spot to me, and I just meant
There was
nothing.
some really juicy grapes on there as well.
There was some
I
lovely
thought you would have
fruit
noticed those.
that I
Mm.
did notice. That, yes, I did, but I didn't cry over them. So um, Freddie also, well, we know that he's a politics student right now. He wants to go to law school. He's going to have to pay for that himself. Jake talks about his parents too. They've helped him his whole life. He wants to now return the favor. Mina, she's mentioned this before in the season that she got married during the pandemic. She didn't then have a honeymoon, and doesn't have any money for it. Also, her daughter is called Luna. She says she mentions her husband and her daughter. I'm saying that because my one of my cats is called Luna. So,
Aw.
and I did mention that in the
Makes you
last
love Mina
episode.
even more.
Makes me even more on board with Mina, exactly. Uh, Leanne also talks about wanting to pay for IVF, and she's got this really emotional story that she has twins, but they were born really prematurely, and it was a really, obviously, like, really, really difficult to go through. Even, and there's been stories online about Leanne's partner outside of the game has just had like cancer treatment, and luckily has had really positive news about it. But so Leanne's had all these really awful things happen. um, Frankie says she's doing it for she's got four sons, so she wants to, everything she does is for them. That's why she's here. And Alexander, oh God, like Alexander's story talks about his brother who died when he was 17. It's so upsetting. And he said his brother used to go to this summer camp, so Alexander wants to give money to them. And he was only 24 when his brother died. Oh, it's just like absolutely heartbreaking. Um, and then we get our little bit of comic relief from Joe. See, Joe can be like nice and funny, and he says, "Well, you've all got such noble reasons," and they're all laughing. And he just says he wants to go on a plane and turn left for once and fly in first class and go off somewhere nice. And if teaching doesn't work out, he'll buy a pub. So there's a nice little moment of levity at
Yeah,
the end.
Peggy Mitchell style.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time on the podcast, but I look on social media and I see what people are saying about the episodes, and there are some Facebook traitors groups with lots of people posting what they think about the most recent episode. And people were complaining about this, like, oh, the dinner was so boring. Why wasn't there a twist? And I think, not. I also thought there was going to be a twist, but I didn't care that there wasn't. Like, can we just have a nice moment where we get a bit emotional and get to know? And it's what's so. I'm sort of getting on my high horse here. I need to calm down. What bothers me so much is there's been a lot of media coverage about how this series of the Traitors is just it's not as good anymore, and we don't like these players. We're not rooting for any of them and all this stuff, and the format's not working anymore. We're over it. And then they give us this really lovely moment to get to know these people, and and there's still people complaining it's boring, make them be horrible again. Like you kind of can't really win, so I just sort of
Yeah.
dismiss all of it.
I think on one hand, just the very kind of tension of is there going to be a twist is enough, and you don't always need a twist because there might be a twist next time. That's the beauty of the traitors. You never really know. So there's still that kind of thought throughout, is something gonna change?
Yeah,
Is there gonna be a twist before, they all go to bed for the night? There isn't, but that emotion you feel as the viewer is still there kind of throughout. And then on the other hand, you need to get to know them a bit more to actually care about them and to care. It means that the coming episodes, when people are murdered and when people are banished, that we're going to care just that little bit more. Um, so it's nice to kind of have a moment where they're talking and it's not all backstabbing and theories and actually just being a little bit honest uh I think the traitors then say afterwards, it's a little bit harder to murder now or whatever they sort of decide to do next because they've got to know these people on a deeper level. So it does add to the gameplay in that way as well.
yeah, I totally agree. I appreciated this scene. I'm not mad at it. So at the end of the dinner, they start to head off. It's time for the turret. Before we get to the turret, though, I do have now I'm going to have a bone to pick actually. Claudia gives us this little to camera moment and tells us the traitors can recruit again tonight if they want. And this annoys me because it feels like quite an arbitrary change all of a sudden. Like for several episodes, Linda and Mina were the only two traitors, and they weren't given the choice every night to seduce someone. So I don't understand. Like a traitor wasn't banished tonight. I don't know why Mina and Charlotte are being allowed to recruit again if they want. So this
So
it really
within
annoyed me.
Yeah, and usually if Claudia gives them the option to recruit, doesn't she usually knock on the door of the turret and sort of
Yeah,
come in with a little letter and say, when Mina was alone, it was you have to recruit, but when there's two, it's you have the option to recruit or murder. For some reason, they didn't do it quite in that way. It was, like you said, it was a sort of little to camera piece. Um, so I don't know I'm not sure why they didn't follow the kind of the usual like drama and kind of ritual of that they've used in previous episodes for that.
yeah.
Was it a bit
I,
of an afterthought? I don't know.
I can't follow it. And I think it falls into another thing that people are starting to sort of complain about is people are calling it a flaw in the format. I think that's the wrong word to use. A lot of people, the Rest is Entertainment podcast, huge podcast. They did a whole segment on the Traitors, and they were saying, "Oh, there's a flaw." They did also say, but they still love the show anyway. But they're saying there's a flaw in the format, and that is there's no point in getting out Traitors, which is true. There isn't actually really much of a point as a player to get the Traitors out really early because they just get replaced. I don't think flaw is the right word. Flaw implies to me something that doesn't work properly. I think the game works fine. I think it's just something that a lot of players don't notice. Anyway, my point is, if people already complain about that aspect of the show that it feels a bit unfair, this this just adds fuel to that. If you just randomly one night say, "Oh, the traitors can recruit again if they want," so it just feels a bit unfair, I think. It doesn't matter because they choose not to recruit anyway, but
Yeah.
um, so on the way to the turret, Mina's saying that it's after that dinner, it feels even worse to murder someone tonight, but they're gonna have to do it anyway. She even makes a little joke and says, "Oh my God, I'm a psychopath." And when they arrive, yeah, they reflect on the dinner party. They reflect on how tough the round table was tonight. They actually don't specifically talk about Mina coming under fire, or if they did, we don't get to see it. So that makes me think it wasn't really that big a deal if they don't discuss it much. I mean, Mina didn't actually get a single vote after everything that Frankie said, so maybe it didn't really matter. I don't
That's
know.
true. Now you say that, I see why you're thinking that earlier in the episode it was kind of edited to make it look like it was discussed more than perhaps it was.
Yeah.
Um, because that's a good point. I that didn't occur to me that usually that would be a up for discussion within the tower. I mean, a lot of the discussion on Mina outside of the table was behind her back.
Mm.
So maybe she just felt that that was a random throw at the table and actually doesn't hold much weight, not realizing that Charlotte has been name dropping her here and there.
Yeah. And they decide that they're not going to recruit tonight. They just want to go ahead and get the numbers down. Um, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this. I was trying to sort of think up myself. What would I do in their position? Would I want to try and recruit someone else now? Like, would I be able to gain somebody's trust at this late stage? Is it better to just get to the end and get rid of his? I think they probably make the right decision. I don't think if I recruited someone at this stage, I would believe that they were suddenly gonna switch their allegiance to me and get to the end with me. Probably. Uh,
No, I think murdering was the right decision. I don't think there's either someone that's so safe in the game they could bring in as a traitor with the view to go to the end as a three, or there isn't really someone who's so obviously you could kind of throw under the bus that you could like give the faithfuls a traitor by targeting them next time.
yeah.
Obviously, the other person at the round table who had almost as many votes as Leon was Frankie. But I feel like she defended herself quite well, and suspicion, obviously, there wasn't loads of chatting after, but I feel suspicion may have moved on from her. A few people said, I think she might be a faithful now. So it's so kind of sprawling, the theories, that there isn't really you can't really bank on anyone at the
Yeah.
minute. So it probably would have been a risk to lure. What's the word?
You can
Seduce.
tell we've both been in job hunting mode for a while, so
Hire me.
hire me as a traitor. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And also Mina's probably still remembering what happened with Anna, where Anna just refused it and then they didn't get to murder anyone. So they're probably thinking, what if we try and recruit someone and they just say no? Then we've just wasted another chance. So what's the point? Let's just us two, we are all we need. Charlotte's probably thinking, I'm all I need. There's no
Yeah.
point. They don't need to bring someone else on. So they talk about their options for murder and they narrow it down to Jake, Joe, or Leanne. For Joe, they say that I actually didn't understand what they meant here. They say he's set on Alexander and he can't be swayed easily. And so I thought, is that a reason to keep him around? Surely, because it's quite good to have someone who's looking at elsewhere. And
Someone else. Yeah.
I wasn't totally sure. They do say it would shake things up if he left, like people would be shocked by it, maybe.
But they
Uh,
used that phrase for Lisa, didn't they?
yeah, so
And
I don't.
nothing was shaken.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if they mean in terms of personal relations, like people get on with them really well, so they would be bothered that just someone they liked wasn't around, rather than anything to do with the gameplay. I'm not sure. For Jake, Charlotte describes him as dead weight. She just says he's clearly a faithful. He's never going to get banished. It's about time. Uh,
We're finding a more ruthless side to Charlotte this episode, which is
yeah,
fun.
absolutely. And for Leanne, they are worried that, like you just said, it seems like in that short space after the round table, now she's not really suspicious of Frankie anymore. So they're worried, well, she's not going to go for Frankie again. That's no use to us. Um, so maybe we should just get rid of her. And probably, well, also Leanne didn't have any votes at the round table tonight. She did not that long ago, though. Um, we finish by, they choose who they're going to go for, and we get some vague comments about who they've picked. Charlotte says they're a big force in the group, not afraid to speak their mind. It'll shock people and it won't point back to us. Mina says this person is a good traitor hunter and their presence will be missed. Um,
I
and
mean, Traitor Hunter makes you think Jake
yeah, it
immediately.
does.
I can't think of out of the other two if they're so obviously kind of would be known as a traitor hunter. That's the only person I think people would give the term traitor hunter to so confidently.
Yeah. Um, I I'll tell you who I predict in a few minutes actually. I'm gonna sort of
Oh.
I had predicted Jake, but now I'm rethinking it. Um,
Mm.
just before the episode ends, we've got Mina telling Charlotte she thinks that they can get to the end together, share the money. And we cut to Charlotte in her interview saying, I'm not stupid. I think we can get to the end. But she basically says, I don't trust Mina and she shouldn't trust me. And the final moment of the episode is Mina in her interview saying, it's really hard to trust traitors, but I can trust Charlotte. I'd be honored to be standing there in the final with her.
Well, when
So,
Mina said, I think we should just share the money two ways, did you see we cut to Charlotte's face and she looks very doubtful. And if she did let that emotion come out at that point on her face, maybe, I don't know, that as Mina, I would be a bit worried. She wasn't sort of looking Mina in the eyes and kind of
yeah,
agreeing at that point. She looked quite dubious,
I
which
noticed
maybe,
that.
yeah.
I just
Again, could it
assume,
just be the edit or,
I'm sure it must just be them taking a shot from a different moment in time and putting it in. I can't believe that Charlotte would have so obviously made an expression like that at that moment. So I think we're being tricked a little bit. Um,
potentially?
as for our predictions, yeah, I thought surely they're going to get rid of Jake based on what they just said about getting rid of a traitor hunter. But then I think they've messed with us before. They've given us these little fake statements at the end that totally misleads me as a viewer. So I am gonna sway in a different direction,
Oh,
and I think they will get rid of Joe. I'm gonna go Joe, and I can kind of see them describing him as a traitor hunter because he was so kind of. almost aggressive with Alexander tonight. And when Kaz was banished like episodes ago, Joe was one of the people who kind of led the charge on that. So I can see that they might still describe him as a traitor hunter, even though he doesn't do it all the time.
I suppose a traitor hunter doesn't have to necessarily be a good traitor hunter, just that they have that
Yeah,
hunting technique to when they're targeting people, which I can see your theory behind that now. That is interesting. I'm going to stick with Jake though. I'm going to stick with the obvious.
yeah, okay.
It could be a double bluff of it's so obvious that it is true.
Yeah. What about this is more difficult to predict, but who do you think might be banished next in the game?
Ooh. So I think I think, as I said before, Frankie got as many votes as Leon. I think she defended herself well. I don't think she'll be next. I think it could be sadly between Mina and Leanne. I
Okay.
think Mina might be at risk if Charlotte continues playing her game in the next episode. You know, Mina's definitely at risk there if Charlotte keeps name dropping. And immediately after the roundtable in this episode, you obviously had some people saying, "Oh, it's got to be Mina next." And if they're saying that with that much conviction, maybe they're going to try and steer people towards. So there's already potentially two or three people who have Mina on their mind for the next day. But Leanne, she has a she seems to have a little bit of a short fuse, and I think maybe could rub someone up the wrong way with that. Again, this is just if people are voting dependent on like likes and dislikes. If she feels insulted by what someone says about her in the next episode and sort of comes for them again, then maybe she could be at risk. I think those are my guesses for banishment. What about you?
I'm really thrown. I I really don't know actually. I'm the sort of the logical part of me wants to say, oh, it looks like Mina's in trouble, but then I think that's too obvious. They've dropped
Linda
too
got away
many.
with it for so long, you know?
Yeah, yeah. We thought exactly. We thought Linda was going every week, and she made it all the way to like week 6 or 7, or episode 6 or 7. Um, I I think Leanne is a good shout actually. I think yeah, she's so hot-headed that that might attract unwanted attention, then maybe they'll come back to her in the mission and how she carried her statue head up the hill, and it was they think that's selfish and stuff. I I wonder if Alexander, maybe things will come back around to him because I don't know if he's that close to anyone, and they all still have this. Well, they all had these doubts that one of the four people who played the deathmatch game was a traitor, and now that Leon's gone and they know he's a faithful, Alexander is the only one left.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll think, well, it was him. He was the traitor that put himself in that game. It wasn't Anna. It wasn't Fozia. It wasn't Leon. So I wonder if Alexander will come under some heat again. I really don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
I'll.
Which, by the way, with that game, I'm sad no one's found the portrait. I want someone to find the
Oh
portrait with the
yeah.
names on. A producer needs to steer someone in that direction because I just think that would create like a bit of drama. You can just imagine it like, oh my God, everybody like come into the bar. I really want to see that happen. And I just think, people might test each other's handwriting and stuff. Like we now know, well, they might also think, that traitor, it could have been Linda, she's gone. But I just want to see what could come of that if they find that painting.
Me too. I think I don't think it will be able to lead to anything. I just because Linda's gone, and but it just would be such a fun moment of discovery for someone to spot it. I really want to see that moment. Yeah, agreed. We've it's not we've been talking all about our thoughts and theories on the show, but there are lots of other thoughts and theories and questions going around on social media. I've picked there are lots of comments on YouTube. So I would definitely head over there and look at all the comments and get involved in the chat. I've picked out a few things. So there have been lots of messages about this ongoing idea of reformatting the show. I've talked about it a few times this season on the podcast. We've been discussing, could they have one or two episodes where even the viewers don't know the identity of the traitors? Like maybe for the whole first episode, I've discussed it on the podcast. Yeah, a while back, Magiker, who was my episode 2 co-host, he sent in a voicemail about it and to let us know they have done this in other versions of the show. Um, I've already made it clear I think they should never do that across the whole show. Like a lot of people sometimes say, let's have a whole edit of the someone on Facebook recently was saying they could do two different edits and on iPlayer you could watch the version where they've edited out all the traitors and you're playing. I think that's almost impossible to edit. Like I just don't think you can do that. However, we've had some sort of well, I'll read the first comment from YouTube. This is from Star.Boy, who says, "Hey, regular listener and love the podcast. Just wanted to chip in on the point that Magiker brought up in his voice memo about an international season having a traitor's identity being concealed for a couple of episodes. I happened to watch the season he was referring to recently. And it was from Norway, season 2. It was the only season I've seen where this has been done, and for what it's worth, as a viewer, I actually found it surprisingly frustrating. Glad to have seen the concept tried, but it really made me realise how much fun it is to observe the interactions during breakfast and the missions and the full knowledge of who the traitors are. Without knowing who it was, just made me incredibly aware of the fact that I wasn't really being given a proper opportunity to make an educated guess myself, but was just at the mercy of the edit. So for that reason, would really not be interested in seeing a version of the show some people have called for. Uh, so that's a good point. That as a
You make a
player,
really good point there, in
yeah.
that you'd be at the mercy of the edit. So really, you're not actually at the mercy of the traitors. You're at the mercy of whoever's, they're going to edit the show to make you think of certain things. So you can't ever really then play the game like the Faithfuls. You're playing like a game on top of that, with like a faceless person having sort of kind of put the pieces together,
Yeah.
which makes it less fun. And it's my favorite thing about the show is following people's strategies, and seeing them, miraculously all come together or completely fall apart. That's my favorite thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's one of the things that makes the show. It's knowing who's lying and watching them lie and watching how well they can lie and seeing their strategies and their tactics. I think there's so much you. I understand the temptation to want to play the game and not, and you also get involved in the guessing. I just think you sacrifice so much other of stuff by seeing it that way. So I don't think it's ever going to happen.
And
Um,
you've got immersive experiences and stuff now where you can go and play the game. And I think that's how you really want to play the game. I think it would be more fun to play it in person or with a card game around a table. Um, just how the faithfuls and the traitors, how they're playing the game in the show. It's because yeah, it's a whole different thing playing it than one step removed,
yeah, definitely.
with an edit.
Yeah. On the other hand, we've got a suggestion about something else that could be done to the format along these lines. This is an email from Herman and Astro, who also donated money to the coffee page for the podcast. So thank you to Herman and Astro. They say, here's an idea for the traitors to appeal to the detective maddies among us. On day one, all the contestants meet as usual. There could be a small sub game during the first challenge to kick things off. Later that evening, the traitors are chosen at the round table, like normal, but their identities remain unknown to the viewers, just as they're hidden from the faithful. The game progresses into day two with a mission, and at this point, suspicion falls on everyone. The faithful are eager to identify the traitors, while the traitors themselves face a unique challenge. They don't know who their fellow traitors are yet. The evening leads to the first banishment as per normal. Here, there's even the possibility that a traitor might unknowingly vote out another traitor. Following this, the traitors meet for the first time and the game continues as normal. So, what about that's like a kind of a compromise? Like, what do you think about maybe just for one episode up until maybe get through a banishment and then we find out? Could that like could there be entertainment in that?
I can see the appeal in that. Like you said, it's kind of like a mini version of getting to have that mystery, uh, you know, having a sort of greater mystery at play there. But I think uh, perhaps if the series does, go on much longer and does feel tired at some point, maybe that would be it because it's quite a big twist. It's quite a big change to the format. There are some key points that I feel we look forward to. There's some in every episode that we know we're going to get, and I think I would miss them. That traitors meeting in the turret at the end of the episode, and I. But then there may come a point where we are tired of that, and I think uh, that could be an interesting change. And I think if it's just for one episode, it could be interesting to see how the gameplay is a bit different. Although I don't know if anyone in the game would care too much at that round table, for example. Why would a traitor really care if they accidentally voted out another traitor? Another
Mm,
traitor, because after all, they're still everyone's in it for themselves, really. Um,
yeah,
it wouldn't be too great a loss. Uh, People are still going to try and banish maybe the people they just don't really like that much, or they don't want to spend the rest of the show with, or who they don't feel are very helpful to the game. So I don't know if like tactics would change massively there.
yeah. That's a very good point, actually. Why would a traitor care if they accidentally voted out another traitor? And if anything, it would make them look more faithful and more like a
Yeah,
clever traitor hunter, and maybe they just get the chance to recruit quite soon again anyway. So yeah, I don't. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. Maybe it wouldn't make that much difference to the tactics and the strategy of people. They'd be doing what they always do anyway. Yeah, we've got one more sort of format suggestion connected to this perceived flaw that there's no point in eliminating traitors, which I don't think really is a flaw. I just think it's part of the game that not everybody appreciates. So, this is a YouTube comment from Ali F, who says, a recent eliminated player on the US version suggests that maybe there should be no murders that night if they're able to get a traitor out. A murder that night if they get it wrong. It gives the players an incentive to really try to get a traitor out. This gives less opportunities for alliances and cliques to control the game. So in other words, yeah, maybe if the faithful accidentally vote out a faithful at banishment, then a murder takes place. If they get a traitor, they've protected everybody from murder. Maybe that's the incentive to actually genuinely get a traitor.
I think that's a really interesting thought. It's hard to try and picture how the whole series would play out and whether it would totally work. You know, if because obviously a certain number of people need to go in the
Yeah.
episodes to be left with that small group to then get to the end point. Could it mean that too little? I mean, does it create a hole in if people are too good at finding traitors, then too few people are actually being eliminated in each episode because then you don't have the murder as frequently. Um, but there might be ways around that. Uh, you can potentially eliminate multiple people in one episode, or does it probably doesn't matter too much actually if there's a slightly bigger group at the end, because when you all stand around that final table at the end, people are still having suspicions with each other and kind of
Hmm.
eliminating. It doesn't I don't think there has to be, for example, four people in the final necessarily. I don't think that would break down the format in any way. So I think that's quite an interesting format idea. What do you think?
Yeah, I replied to the YouTube comment and said something similar, although you explained it a bit better. That yeah, you'd have to think about whether or not it would affect the numbers of people in the game. Like, how can you plan for that? Like, yeah, what if you end up with a group of players? This is very unlikely, but that they keep getting rid of traitors, and so none of them are getting murdered, and the traitors just keep recruiting and losing. So yeah, they'd have to work in ways out of that, like a mission where at the end of this mission, three of you are going to get murdered, or like ways to quickly get rid of people if they really need to, or like you say, actually, doesn't make a massive difference if you've got six or seven people at the end game. They can just very quickly do votes, see if they want to get rid of anyone else, and maybe you do just end up with like five or six people, and if they're faithful, they share the prize. Maybe that's not the problem is maybe not that exciting if they've got rid of too many traitors really well. Maybe it's not as exciting if you think, oh, the faithful are probably going to win this show now. I don't know, but
Hmm.
someone else, I can't remember if it was on a YouTube comment or Spotify or an email. I'm really sorry. Someone suggested What about a monetary prize? What if every time you vote out a traitor, we'll add £10,000 to the prize pot? So it's a similar idea, like maybe give them an incentive to genuinely get out traitors. That might even encourage the traitors themselves to turn on one another earlier if they think it's going to contribute to the prize pot.
Just on that point, one more thing I thought in obviously it's the idea of there being an incentive to vote out a traitor. It's tough, but just like beyond that, when people get recruited and then it's like, oh, we were just back in the position we were before. We still have this number of traitors. However, maybe uh can what the faithfuls need to look for there is the idea that someone in the group changes unless they're very good at masking that. So
Hmm.
maybe that is their clue in a way, is looking for those really subtle changes in someone because their whole position within the game changes overnight, and that can be quite a hard thing to mask. So I'm just trying to think of how actually it does play into the faithfuls. It can play into the faithfuls' hands a little bit more um, in sort of recruiting traitors. I do think broadly it can feel a little bit unfair towards them, but there is that sense that someone is having to try extra hard that
Hmm.
next day to figure out what their position is within the game. At the same time, it doesn't really seem like they've been too good at spotting that so far. So it must be quite. People are just very good at lying, I suppose. And
Yeah, either people are really good at lying naturally, or people are just really gullible naturally. I'm not sure. Maybe both. Um, so, listeners, remember that Eliana and I have been trying to deceive one another this whole time in our game of lying and deception. Before we get there and reveal things, we've got a couple of important things to let you know about. Firstly, Eliana, you have been recommending something to me for a while and have still not managed to catch it, but you've got this great recommendation that probably Traitors fans will appreciate. What is this thing you've been talking to me about?
I think you'll love it. The movie Conclave. It's you probably have heard of it by now because I think it's got something like 12 BAFTA nominations. Um, it's still in cinemas as far as I know. I
I
think
think
because it's
so.
awards season, it will be in cinemas for a fair while still. It's a thriller about the selection of a new pope, and it's set within the sort of secretive confines of the Vatican. And it's doing really well, with the nominations. And when I went to the cinema, it was weeks after it initially came out, and it was fully booked. It was one of the big view screens, fully booked. I tried to kind of like sneak onto a better seat than what I'd booked, as you do, and then I had to do the like shameful like walk back to my like super saver seat down at the front just before it started. But at the same time, I was happy, like, oh look, like cinema going, it's back on. There's so many people here to see it. But I wonder if it's doing so well because it's existing in a post Traitors world, where we've got like a real appetite for this kind of thing now. So like within this I want to call it a format. It's not, but like it's got that kind of Traitors format within it. It's got these regular beats of um, all of the religious leaders voting, place like casting their vote for who the next pope's going to be, and it's a little bit like the vote at the round table, not the sort of discussion element, but the kind of the tension in like who's it going to be? Are they going to come to a unanimous decision? How is this going to change things? There are people you're rooting for, people you're not rooting for so much. And then in between this vote, there's all sorts of mysteries being unraveled and all sorts of backstabbing going on. And it's got some of that ceremony and ritual that the traitors have, as well as all the drama and the mystery and the strategy. So it just immediately reminded me of the traitors, and I really enjoyed it when I watched it. It's really fun. So I definitely recommend going to see that.
Yeah, I definitely will watch it. I really, really want to see it. And I sent you this thing on Instagram that I don't know if it was the BBC or if it was like Studio Lambert or it's the film production company, but it wasn't like a fan-made thing. Someone had taken shots from Conclave and compared them to shots from the Traitors to like show the similarities. Which it's obviously it was supposed to be funny. But yeah, that just reminded me of it, and it's so funny that you mentioned it today. And even in the Traitors New Zealand and I think in Canada, they don't call it the Traitors Turret or the Traitors Tower. They just call it the
Mm.
Conclave. So they even use that word in those versions of the Traitors, which is really
I
funny.
didn't know that. Oh wow. Okay.
But I
Yeah.
will go and see it as soon as I might even go today once we have finished the podcast and all the editing is done. So I'm going to try and catch it as soon as I can.
Tell me what you think.
Yes. So, as for the Trader podcast, if you've enjoyed listening, then as always, it's great if you can subscribe or leave a lovely review on whatever platform you're using. It's really, really helpful to help other people. I keep always say that it's really helpful to help people and be quite repetitive to find the podcast. And you can follow on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Trader podcast. Currently on YouTube, we're approaching about 700 YouTube subscribers, which is great. I can't make back any of the money that I spend on the podcast from YouTube until we reach 1,000 subscribers. So even if you normally listen somewhere else, it's super helpful if you head there and just press the subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. And you can leave comments on YouTube too, or you can leave comments on Spotify. You can also email me at thetradarpodcast@gmail.com, and you can leave a voice message at memo.fm/thetradarpodcast. We don't have any today, but there have been several so far who are all going into the competition draw to win this copy of the Traitors board game. And again, apologies. This is only for people in the UK and Ireland. I'm really sorry. So if you send a voice memo, you'll go into the competition for that. Again, like I mentioned Herman and Astro earlier, they donated to the coffee page for the podcast. So if you feel like you want to and you can head to ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley and you can, it's not a subscription, it's not like Patreon. You can do a one-off, like £2 or something like that. And just helps with all of the things that I have to pay for to keep the podcast up and running. Final thing before we finish our game and reveal our lies is I said this in the last episode, I'm saying it again. The first 5 episodes of The Traitors US will drop on Friday, the 24th of January. That's the day of the UK finale on BBC iPlayer. And then one episode will appear every Friday, just hours after it airs in the US. So, UK viewers, you will be up to date with Traitors US. You will have something to move on to right away once this series is done. And you can listen to The Trader. We've already covered episodes 1 to 4 of Traitors US. So, the podcast is ready and waiting for you. Now it is time for us to conclude our game of deception. We've been playing the Trader Traitor. Eliana, I have told you a lie today. I'm really sorry.
Mhm.
I bet. Have you told me a lie?
I have told you a lie today.
Okay. I made a couple of little notes because I've got 2 guesses of what you may have lied about. For most of the podcast, I nothing you said was suspicious to me. I was really struggling to think of anything.
I was struggling and I have one note for you. So I'm going all in with one guess.
Okay. I mean I'm going to pick one of my two. I'm not going to like put two out there. I'm going to have to choose one.
Okay.
I've got this horrible feeling that you know what I lied about. I feel like I've been rumbled. I don't know. I'm gonna go first. But here's my 2 options, and then I'll tell you the one that I'm going for. You talked about really early on. You talked about Lisa, and you said that she had little owls on her shirt or something. And if she did, that totally passed me by. So I thought that might be a lie. I just agreed with you, but I actually didn't know if it was true or not.
Okay.
And then my second one, and I'm gonna go for this. I think this may be your lie. I think when you went to see Conclave, you didn't really sit in a seat you weren't supposed to sit in and then go back to
Mhm.
your actual seat. I mean, and I can kind of, it's quite funny, but also like, you stick to the rules. Like you're a very sensible person. That would be quite cheeky of you to do something like that. So
Mhm.
I think that's your lie.
Okay. Would you like me to reveal the truth?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I did have to sneak back to my seat. That's all true. Yeah, and it was like seconds before the movie started. I felt really bad, and I was like right in the middle of the row, so I had to do the like, oh, excuse me, sorry. And I had like snacks. I had like an armful of snacks as well. Sadly, I wish that was the lie. but the lie was the first one you said.
No, it was the owls.
Lisa did not have flying owls on her shirt. She did, though. She had deer on her shirt, which I noticed. And I thought that was very fitting, but I thought, oh, it's not so far removed if she had owls instead.
I'm
That was my lie.
I'm so annoyed that I didn't. At the last minute, I was like, no, I'll go for the cinema one because it's so funny. And because you had said before we started recording, oh, I'll talk about Conclave, I thought she's planned this. She's
All
planned this to
planned.
be part of it. But you had also planned the other one, which was the lie.
And I had
Well,
to get it in quick because I knew it would stress me out throughout the call thinking I'm bad at lying, as you can see. You pretty much sussed me out that
I didn't
I
go for
had to
it.
get it in.
No, you had told me before this that you were worried about the lie. You didn't think you were going to be able to do it. And I mean, I was suspicious, but you tricked me. I didn't go for it. So,
Well, hire me as a traitor.
yeah.
That's it. It's my new job title.
No, I'm going to be really upset if you
Okay.
catch me out. What do you think I have lied to you about?
I think you know that I haven't seen the US Traitors. So you said that the US Traitors did the exact same challenge as as episode 9 in the UK Traitors. And that was the only thing I could think of. For some reason, it just stood out for me. I feel like I'm at the round table right now. I feel like it just stood out for me, and it's just a bit weird. Um, Unless it's true, and then it's totally normal to bring that up. But I feel because you know I haven't watched it, you thought I would just sort of go along with that. So that's what I think your lie is, that the US traitors did the same challenge as this episode.
Okay. I can reveal that that was not my lie and that that was true. Um, however, you're going to be so mad at yourself because you're incredibly close to the truth. I
Okay.
didn't lie about US traitors. They did just do this
Hmm.
mission. I lied about New Zealand traitors and I made up a thing. I said that they had this dinner where the last person to leave got murdered. That was all false.
Oh, oh, that is so irritating. I think I zoned in on that first one. I was like, yep, that's it. And then I just was so trustworthy. Um, oh,
Well,
you fooled me.
we fooled each other, but we weren't like we were sort of not a million miles away. So if we were
Mm.
on the traitors, this is where the viewers would be screaming at the screens, going, you're so close, you almost got it." So really we should be cast in the next series, is what I'm saying. We'd make good
Yes,
TV.
please. I'm down for that. Although I
Eliana,
wouldn't trust you. I wouldn't trust you. I'd throw you under the bus in the first episode. It's Matthew.
God, I thought we knew each other. Jeez, right, okay,
Mm.
now I know. Right.
You've got to look at who's close to you.
If we, I mean, I'm giving this one away in the competition, but I do have my own version of the board game.
We
Uh,
need to
th
play.
I know I actually haven't played it. I've got the card game and I've played that. I actually I've read the instructions for the board game. I was going to play it at Christmas. It just ended up not happening. We must play the Traitors at some point. So,
100%.
but not gonna trust you now because you're not gonna trust me. So.
Well,
Um, I hope you enjoyed your debut appearance on the Trader today.
thank you for having me. I've had the best time.
It was really good fun. Thank you so much. And listeners, until the next episode, which is on its way in 5 or 6 days for episode 10, keep us on your Trader. Bye bye.
Bye.